Hello all. So tomorrow you have your English literature board exam. So now we will be reading I Know by the Cagebird Sings, and obviously after that we will be solving MCQs. We have solved 8 English literature practice papers till now, and we will be solving it later today. So first we'll be reading, so you'll get a quick revision, and I'll tell you the important points as well. So without wasting time, we'll quickly start with our video. So I Know by the Cagebird Sings, the author is Maya Angelou. So first we'll read about the poet. Maya Angelou was an African-American author, poet, historian, songwriter, playwright, director, a civil activist, etc. She was best known for her 7 autobiographical books. She was the first black woman director in Hollywood. So now we will also read which is given in our textbook, that is our treasure trove. So it is given that Maya Angelou is a powerful feminist writer of Afro-American ethnicity. Ethnicity means a group having common thoughts and culture. She is a widely acclaimed author, poet, and civil rights activist who worked closely with Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. Maya Angelou had an extremely traumatic childhood, and her poem, I Know by the Cagebird Sings, written in 1969, tells of her life up to the age of 70. It is the poem that brought her international acclaim and recognition. So, the summary of the poem. Maya Angelou's I Know by the Cagebird Sings is built around a metaphor that contrasts the condition of a free bird with a caged bird. So what is a metaphor? Metaphor is an indirect comparison of two different objects based on a single or some common characteristics. The poet uses symbolism in the poem. Symbolism, it is an object representing another to give it an entirely different meaning that is much deeper and more significant. When we analyze the poem, we realize that it is not really about birds that Maya talks about, but she highlights the importance of freedom for every creature on earth. The bird in the cage is a symbol of all African Americans and their fight for freedom. It symbolizes the struggle of being a black author whose words are not heard and of one who longs for freedom. So we'll start with the poem. The free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends, and dips his wings in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. So, talking about the first 3 lines, the free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream. So, downstream, it is with the direction of the stream, towards the mouth of a stream or a river, or in the direction in which the stream flows along. So here the poet beautifully describes a free bird that flows in the stream. It seems to be moving along with the stream. Leaps is jumps or flies. So she is talking about the white Americans. Till the current ends and dips his wings in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. So here current is tide and dares, he has the courage to claim the sky. So she says, the tides have subsided and the orange rays of the sun fall on the bird's wings, and the bird challenges the sky as if he owns it completely. The bird lives freely and is not afraid to do so. The free bird flies and sways wind in the evening against the orange sky. He has a right to claim the sky as it flies and dips his wings. But the bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied. So he opens his throat to sing. So talking about the first 2 lines. Stalk, it is walk stride through, to walk up and down. So this stanza is in stark contrast with the first. By using the word but to begin this stanza, the poet prepares the reader for this contrast. Then she describes a bird that walks through his narrow cage, and we realize that this bird is not a free bird like the earlier. one, but in fact this bird is caged. The narrow cage, it is the restricted place and has which symbolizes that the caged bird has no freedom. The bird is confined to a limited space. Can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. So the poet further describes the bird to be in a very agonizing condition where he can rarely see through his cage, and she claims that the wings of this poor bird is clipped and his feet are tied to the cage so that he does not escape. So these are the restrictions on the caged bird. So he opens his throat to sing. He is in the hopeful mode. Though there are restrictions on the bird, powerless it can't enjoy and just longs for freedom, and he struggles for it in different ways. The bird in the cage in an awful condition, so to express his sorrow he prepares to sing. The caged bird sings with fearful trill of the things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings for freedom. Talking about the first two lines, trill, it is a quavering sound, fear of harassment, torture or death, we may say, fearful trill. So here the bird starts to sing. He sings with a trembling voice. His quavering voice indicates that the poor creature's heart is full of grief, of the things unknown but longed for still. He sings about things that are not known to him, but he has always had a strong desire to have them fulfilled. So he longs for the human rights, the freedom. And his tune is heard on the distant hill. His song can be heard far away. This shows how lonely he feels. The caged bird sings for freedom. The caged bird sang about freedom. He strongly craved to be free. It was the only thing that he longed for and expresses his yearning to be free through his song. So their voice will be heard. The people will struggle. So he longs for the human rights of freedom, and the song cannot be restricted. It is a cry for help so that the others can help him. The struggle has great impact on the others. The caged bird sings of the things unknown. The poet conveys that oppression and subjugation can't last forever. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn-bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. So now it is again about the free bird. So the first two lines say, the third stanza reverts back to the free bird, further strengthening the difference between the free bird and the caged bird in the minds of the readers. She further adds that free bird is enjoying another breeze and enjoying the moment with the trees that dance along the breeze, as excited as the bird. And the fat worm's waiting on a dawn-bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. So dawn, it is the time just before the sunrise, and lawn is the grass. So here, the reflection of the early rays of the sun on the grass, it means dawn-bright lawn. Even morning, the free bird leaves its nests in search of food and survival. The fat worms in the lawn seem to be lying there on the grass, waiting to be eaten by the bird. And then it flies back into the sky as if it rules it and owns it. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams. His shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. So talking about the first two lines, nightmare is an unpleasant dream. Here nightmare refers to his own present condition that makes scream out of fear. Then again the poet draws a contrast between the caged bird and the free bird. The caged bird seems to be standing on the grave of its dreams, that is, his dreams are destroyed and he has been kept as a captive. The poet describes the powerlessness of the caged bird with the words, his shadow shouts, which paints a picture of the loneliness of the bird. As the line progresses, a pity towards the caged bird is intensified when his own condition scares him and makes him scream out in fear. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The lines are repeated to create an emphasis that the wings of the bird are clipped and its legs have been tied to the cage. He has been imprisoned behind the cage, prohibiting him to live a normal lifestyle, whereas the free bird has no such restriction and it joyfully flies across the enormous sky as if he owned it. The caged bird sings with fearful thrill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings for freedom. Talking about the first three lines, the bird starts to sing. He sings with a trembling voice and he sings about things that are not known to him. But longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. It sings about things that he has always wished for and he can be heard far away. He sings about freedom. He wished to be free. So another breeze, new or approaching breeze. So the trade winds are the strong winds that blow all the time towards the equator and then to the west. The grave of dreams is the unfulfilled dreams or the hopes of the caged bird. And his shadow shouts. So here it means looking at its own shadow, the caged bird screams as if it has seen a nightmare. The last stanza acts as a repetition which justifies the bird's stout determination to keep going after his dream of freedom. Now talking about the themes of the poem. First is racism. Maya Angelou felt that the black Americans were not free. African Americans longed for freedom and equality. The poet presents two birds, the free bird, a metaphor for the white American, and the caged bird for the African American. The encaged bird longs for freedom and equality in spite of restrictions. The second theme is freedom and equality. Freedom is the birthright of every individual. Captivity is like to be caged an unnatural state. Even a bird does not. African Americans are unhappy in their cage, which is racism, gender inequality, and powerlessness. They can no longer be suppressed. So, the poet also reflects the facts of racism or racial segregation and discrimination in American society against black people, using metaphors of caged bird and the free bird, as we discussed. Maya Angelou has highlighted the nature of captivity and the importance of American ideals of freedom, liberty. The caged bird symbolizes African Americans and their sorrowful plight compared to the white Americans who are symbolized by the free bird. If you think of the lines, the grave of dreams, nightmare scream, and compare the liberty of the free bird with that of the shackled caged one, we'll come to know this, definitely. So now, we'll first read the paraphrase. A free bird flies and enjoys flying with the wind. The caged bird does not have freedom and is imprisoned between the bars. He cannot fly, so he sings. The caged bird sings about freedom because he cannot fly. The free bird can do whatever he wants. He has food and feels like the sky belongs to him. The caged bird dreams but cannot have his dreams come true and just sings. The caged bird sings about freedom because he cannot fly. The free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends and dips his wings in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. But a caged bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with fearful thrill of the things unknown, but for which she still longs and yearns. His tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds blow softly through the sighing trees, and the fat worms wait on a dawn-bright lawn. The free bird names the sky his own, but the caged bird stands on the grave of his dreams. His shadow shouts a nightmare scream. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing, as that is all he can do. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown, but for which he still longs. And his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. So this was the paraphrase of the whole poem. Now we'll go to the summary of it. Maya Angelou's highly romantic Caged Bird first appeared in the collection Shaker, Why Don't You Sing in 1983. The first two stanzas contrast two birds. Lines 1 through 7 describe the actions of a bird that is free. It interacts with nature and dares to claim the sky. The second stanza, lines 8 to 14, tells of a captured bird that must endure clipped wings, tight feet, and bars of rage. Yet he still opens his throat and sings. The third and the fifth stanzas are identical. Lines number 2nd, 4th, and 6th, and lines 5 and 7 of this identical stanzas rhyme. This repeated verse elaborates on the song of freedom trilled by the caged bird. Though his heart is fearful and his longings unmet, the bird continues to sing of liberty. The fourth stanza continues the comparison of the two birds, the caged bird and the free bird. The free bird enjoys the breeze, the trees, the winds, the lawn, the sky, and the fat worms. The caged bird, with his wings still clipped and his feet still tied, continues, nevertheless, to open his throat and sing. Like the refrain of a hymn, the fifth and final stanza is a reiteration. Angelou's characterization of a bird that is free, first and the fourth stanzas, provides an effective contrast with the bird that is caged. The sentiment that Angelou evokes in the reader is suggestive of Danda's inspirational poem. Now coming to the critical appreciation of the poem. The poem serves to provide a relevant piece of art that can withstand the test of time. It manages with ease to inspire a mass of people to better their lives by using the power of words, and honor prominent authors only dream about achieving. In today's society, many people struggle with the feeling of being under lock and key, unable to reach and are prevented from making any goals for themselves. The poem I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings discusses this dilemma. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou is arguably one of the most moving and eye-opening poems ever written. It is clear that this title had great significance to Angelou, as it was the title of her entire life story. She often felt that her words were not heard because of the color of her skin. She felt that in some ways she was still experiencing slavery. Although African American people were free people in Angelou's time, there were still many restrictions on them in society, making it so that many black Americans did not feel free at all. This poem reveals the depth of those feelings. The poet uses the title I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings to emphasize the importance of liberty. To a caged bird, liberty is very important. The only liberty he has while he is imprisoned is to sing. Maya Angelou uses dramatic metaphors and detailed imagery to compare and contrast the differences between a caged bird and a free bird. With these descriptions, inferences can be drawn to produce the much deeper meaning behind the symbol of a trapped bird. The words were actually first written by one of the first nationally acclaimed African American poets, Paul Laurence Dunbar, in his poem Sympathy. I know what the caged bird feels, alas, when the sun is bright on the upland slopes. A clearly not so happy bird is throwing itself against the bars of its cage. It struggles so much that it begins to bleed and needs to stop. But once its wounds are healed, it tries again. It's persistent. And in the final stanza, it sings a prayer wishing to be free. Angelou calls her young self a caged bird. So what's a cage? What keeps her from freedom? And what cages are and what cages her are racism, insecurity, poverty, and abuse. But no matter how many times these forces push against her, she continues to fight back. Angelou gives us some insight into what the cagebird means for her in the last stanza. That is, the cagebird sings with the fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the cagebird sings of freedom. Angelou's bird is angry. In the rest of the poem, we learn that not only it is caged, but its wings are clipped and its feet are tied, so it can barely move. While the free bird gets to fly around looking at all the awesome things life has to offer, like fatworms, the cagebird stands on the grave of dreams. Angelou's bird has never been free, but it still sings a song of freedom. Singing is all Angelou's bird can do. At first, she doesn't even know what freedom is, but she understands that her life is not the one she wants. So she does what she can, singing her song, and by the end she is a little bit closer to freedom. Maya Angelou's touching poem revolves around the theme of freedom. The poem is about the heroic of the perfect and good leader to guide the minority black race from out of suffering and lead them to get the acknowledgement that is given to majority of the white people. The first lines of the poem discuss what a free bird does. Angelou writes, the free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends and dips his wings in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. With these words, we get a real sense of sensory experiences from giving the wind a back to making the rays of sun something that can be touched or dipped. This adds to the intensity and impact of the poem right from the start. Notable characteristics of the free bird can be seen here as well. It leaves no stone of no it leaves no stone it leaves no stone unturned and is not afraid to try new things. It has a sense of adventure that is unparalleled and has a fighting spirit. When the writer says that the free bird dares to claim the sky, she is saying that the free bird doesn't wait for anyone to tell it to do something. It does what it wants, and this defines its freedom. The free bird is brought up later on in the poem for a second time. This instance describes what the bird is thinking about. It has dreams and can imagine and freely think of other things beyond himself and his environment. The author writes, the free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soft through the sighing trees, and the fatworms waiting on a dawn-bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. The ability of this bird to declare the sky as belonging to him shows confidence and self-assurance. This bird knows what it wants, and not even the sky is the limit. The caged bird, on the other hand, is very different from its free counterpart. The reader is introduced to the second bird quite dramatically. This serves to show the extent of how contrasting the two creatures are. Maya Angelou writes, but a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The line that stands out the most is the fact that the bird's wings are clipped. Wings give birds freedom to fly above the rest. It allows them to get from one point to the other. It is their ideological independence. Opening his throat to sing also gives an image of pain and distress. Mostly, the caged bird is suppressed. More is stated about the cries of the caged bird. It is a piercing sting of a song that spreads far and wide. Although the singing is full of pain, anger, and fear, the bird sings of things unknown. The caged bird craves to learn about its surroundings. It dreams of a better life. The issues of dreams and goals come into question with the caged bird as well, but in a different fashion. The author writes, but the caged bird stands on the grave of dreams. His shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. This line paints such a vivid image of dreams that cannot be fulfilled. A grave, for instance, is a symbol of death. A grave of dreams is rather grim. It shows an environment where dreams cannot be fulfilled. Instead of happy and positive dreams, they are nightmares. Instead, nightmares that keep the caged bird grounded. These two birds, however, serve to symbolize much more than what lies on the surface. As examined, the cage keeps the bird locked in, unable to escape and enjoy the freedoms life has to offer. Maya Angelou grew up in a time and place where African Americans were segregated by law and were heavily discriminated against. These unfair laws are similar to the way the cage keeps the birds locked in. Also, the caged bird sings and screams at breeded doom. This way a way of rebellion and protest of the enslavement. A lot of African Americans at this time also used music as their means of defiance against unlawfulness. These songs, although insignificant to outsiders, served as a means of freedom. One of the stanzas is repeated, which brings attention to the idea of the caged bird singing for freedom. Repeating different words or phrases creates structure within a poem, and it helps readers focus on a specific thought or emotion that the poet would like them to notice. This poem uses a metaphor to compare caged bird to African Americans fighting for equality during the civil rights movement. Metaphors compared to objects or concepts without using the words like or as. In addition to using metaphor, Angelou utilizes repetition to reinforce the idea that African Americans cried out for freedom from oppression even in the bleakest of times when their oppressors did not want to hear them. Angelou repeats the third and the fifth final stanzas with the caged bird singing for freedom. There is vivid imagery in the first stanza when the free bird dips his wing in the orange sun rays, and personification and alliteration in the fourth stanza when the caged bird's shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. The repetition of the consonant S and giving the caged bird's shadow the human quality of shouting emphasizes the bird's nightmarish existence living in confinement. The tone of this poem is reflective and critical because it compares the situation of the black people to the one of the white people. The poem transmits the ideals that this situation is unfair. Many have grown to use this poem to symbolize different obstacles in their lives. This poem can represent a wide range of things from society, physical barriers, fear, addiction, or any negative behavior. The freebird can then represent the longing and desire for a better way of life. A better life is a universal desire. So I have another sheet which I have received from a school, and these are the notes which the students had received. So I'll be reading from that. This poem, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou, revolves around the theme of freedom. It is clear that the title has great significance to the poetess Maya, as it was the title of her entire life story. She often felt that her words were not heard because of the color of her skin. She felt that in some ways she was still experiencing slavery, for although African American people were free people in her time, there were still many restrictions on them in society, making it so that the many black Americans never felt that kind of freedom. This poem reveals the depth of those feelings and it emphasizes on the importance of liberty. The poetess has confessed the feeling of free bird and in other words, white Americans and caged bird, or in other words, black Americans. To a caged bird or slavery, he can only dream, and the only liberty he has while imprisoned or chained to slavery is to sing. So stanza 1. The opening lines of the poem talk about a free bird which flies and enjoys flying with the breeze. It springs free from the ground to fly along with the direction of the wind. It seems as if the bird is immersed in the orange rays of the sun and it dares to claim the sky. Talking about the stanza 2. The caged bird, on the other hand, stalks down his narrow cage. He is constantly trying to see through the bars of the cage, but it is limited. He can almost never see through the bars. He is enslaved to such an extent that his wings are clipped and his feet are tied. Under such circumstances, the only option he has is to open his throat and sing. Stanza 3. The caged bird sings, and while singing, he produces an unsteady quavering of his voice, as he is singing of things unknown. He realizes that he is caged and can never be free, but still longs and frets for freedom. The song of freedom can be heard on the distant hills and faraway places. Now coming to stanza 4. The free bird thinks of another place. The poem now reverts to the unrestricted movement of the free bird. The free bird thinks of another breeze and the trade winds that are the strong winds that blow all the time towards the equator and then to the west. Blow softly through the pine trees, and the fat worms wait on a dawn-bright lawn, full of dew, for the free bird to consume. The free bird flies around, naming the sky as his own, as there are no other birds to compete with. Now coming to stanza 5. The caged bird, on the other hand, stands in his cage, which has now become the grave of the bird's dream of freedom. He knows he will never be free. His shadow shouts a nightmare scream. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his mouth and sings as that is all he can do. Coming to the final stanza, that is the stanza 6. The final stanza is a repeat of the third stanza, where he sings in a nervous voice about the things which are unknown to him, and his song of freedom can be heard in the distant hills and faraway places. So now, hereby I end the session, and we will meet soon. We will again start solving MCQs. Hi Gurchand. So meet you soon. I hope this session has helped you. If you have not watched the earlier videos, please do watch it. It is there in the playlist created. We have solved 8 practice papers of English literature and we will be solving today. So please stay tuned to the channel and be there for the live session. Thank you so much.